Three things to know. First, it's back to school for Congress. Ahead of the midterm elections, there's a lot to do and little will to do it. Then, the owner of the Atlanta Hawks ejects himself over a racially offensive email. Bruce Levinson says he will sell his controlling interest in the team, but truth is, he's been wanting to get out for some time. And in the corner office, the head of one of Nigeria's largest banks on how Africa continues to grow even as Europe slumps. Arise Xchange for Monday starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. They probably would rather be any other place than Washington, but lawmakers, many of whom are up for re-election, return to the Capitol on Monday. Here are some of the issues they could be working on, but won't. Immigration reform. The president has also said this can wait until after the November elections, angering both his supporters on the left and big business groups that are pushing for reform. A resolution to fund the government and avoid a possible shutdown. Another issue making businesses nervous, the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank, and, of course, some sort of authorization to grant the president power to attack ISIS in Syria. One person who is certainly hard at work in Washington is our own Eric Ham, who is joining us now. Good afternoon, Eric.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, of course. So when we see what's going on in Washington, is there any talk that they're going to tackle any of this other than ISIS right now?
The only issue that I think realistically will get tackled, because it has to, is actually funding the government. We know that the funding is going to run out during the fiscal year of September 30th. And this is an issue that they have to tackle. And, of course, the charter for the Export-Import Bank ends at the same time. So the thought is that they'll have to tackle both at that time. But I think what they'll probably do is actually punt on the Export-Import Bank issue so as to hopefully avoid a government shutdown.
So do you think, and we should say that the nation's fiscal year begins on October 1st,
Correct.
Do you think that they're going to simply issue a new continuing resolution to fund the government, or is there going to be a longer-term solution?
No, I think what they're going to do is just simply punt by just having a continuing resolution until they come back after the midterm elections. You got to understand that we are moving into the midterm elections, and the Senate hangs in the balance. And I just think that both the president and leaders of Congress simply don't want to take on any really tough issues unless they absolutely have to. Now, of course, I think that's going to make businesses very nervous because you do have issues surrounding both the funding of the government and particularly the Export-Import Bank. But I think the political reality suggests that they just aren't willing to move the dice on these issues.
Yeah, and on the Export-Import Bank, this is part of the government that actually makes the United States a whole lot of money every year. Why is this issue specifically tearing Republicans apart?
Well, the problem is you have members of the far right who see the Export-Import Bank in very simplistic terms. They just see it as corporate welfare for large Fortune 500 companies. But what they don't realize is this is an independent entity that has fewer than 500 employees, and it generates it has a lending authority of more than $140 billion and is responsible for more than 200,000 jobs. And actually what it does is it makes American companies and businesses, primarily small businesses, competitive with companies around the world. You have to understand, there are countries that have more than 70 similar types of banks that are funding and offering subsidies to companies in their respective countries.
And it's really the defense industry that is very, very concerned about the Export-Import Bank. And I'm wondering if the Republicans who support the bank can tie together some of our threats that we have in ISIS and elsewhere, because that's how we fund a good part of the defense industry is through the backstop of the Export-Import Bank.
Absolutely. And they are very much behind this. But also they've got some very other powerful lobbyists who will be trying to usher this process forward, namely the Chamber of Commerce and the American Manufacturers Association is also behind supporting this as well. So I think we're going to see it pushed back, but expect a real fight, I think, after the midterm elections.
And then, of course, we're talking about ISIS. Do you think that either the president is going to go to Congress, because we're going to hear from him on Wednesday, either the president is going to go to Congress and ask for authorization to attack Syria, or Congress may get its own hand forced by some Congress people introducing legislation?
I do believe that Senator Bill Nelson, he's already said that he would introduce legislation. We have to understand it was the second journalist who was killed, Steve Saltloff. He's actually from Florida. So I believe that Senator Bill Nelson wants to do the right thing here. But this, I think, is where you will actually see both the president and the Congress actually working in tandem to try to do something. And I think what the president might want to do is try to put forward a plan. Remember, he's been pressured. There's been a lot of pressure on him since he made the comment that he doesn't have a strategy yet. Mm-hmm. So I think this is where you're going to see both the president and the Congress feverishly working to try to put something in place before the Congress leaves and to give the president the authority to do what he needs to be done facing a threat like ISIS.
All right, Eric, you and I show up to work. Let's see if Congress can do the same. Eric Ham in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the market slid on Monday on concerns over some global economic growth. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped about 26 points to 17,111. The S&P 500 was below 2,000 for a while, came back late in the day, and the NASDAQ actually did finish the day up 9 and change to 45.92. Some of the stocks we're watching today. Boeing announcing the first buyer for its new aircraft. Irish airline Ryanair will purchase up to 200 of the new 737 jets in a deal valued at about $22 billion. BA closing up 3 and change to 127.98. Chiquita has delayed a meeting for shareholders to approve an inversion tax deal with rival Fifes until it can talk with 2 other Brazilian companies that are bidding for the company. Chiquita closing down 15 cents. And Campbell's Soup shares dropping by more than 2% today after the company told investors to lower their expectations for the current fiscal year. The company posting earnings of $137 million or 43 cents a share, compared with 50 cents a share last year. Campbell down a little more than 2.5% to 43.39. And taking a look at commodities, gold dropping back 11.80 to 12.55, and oil pulling back even more to 92.95. That will bring down prices more at the pump. Coming up, another off-the-court distraction for the NBA has race again in the spotlight. And in the NFL, shocking video of a Ravens player pummeling his girlfriend has finally led to his ouster. You're watching Arise Exchange. Last week on Arise Exchange. Are you ready for some football? The NFL money machine gears up.
It's a dicey situation when you look at how much money is being funneled in and how much money they're taking.
There is a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russian separatists. They have stopped shooting at each other. We call that progress. The owner of the Java Jugs coffee shop has pleaded guilty to offering a daily dose of caffeine and sex, giving her customers a little extra jolt with their coffee. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. The controlling owner of the Atlanta Hawks is putting the team up for sale following news that he sent a racially offensive email 2 years ago where he pushed for the team to attract more white fans. In the email, Bruce Levinson said several very offensive statements, among them, quote, "My theory is that the black crowd scared away the whites and there are simply not enough fluent black fans to build a significant season ticket base." Levinson also complained that there were too many blacks on the so-called Kiss Cam and that there was too much hip-hop played at the games. He voluntarily turned the email over to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and this weekend announced that he will sell the team. Levinson has apologized about the comments, calling it, quote, inflammatory nonsense. Oppenheimer Executive Director and Sports Business Analyst Stephen Colavito joins us now with more. Stephen, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Great to be back, Andrew.
Walk us through a little bit about how this email came to light and why it took from when he turned over the emails to the decision this weekend.
It's interesting. Danny Ferry, who is the general manager of the Hawks, this whole investigation actually started internally within the Hawks organization. Danny basically was going through a conference call with the ownership, talking about some of the players that they would be interested in picking up in free agency. One of those players is a young man called Luol Deng. He's out of Chicago, or actually played for Chicago, and he's Sudanese by birth. He actually said in a statement to the owners he still has some African in him. When he said that, that caused within the organization an internal investigation, at which time investigators found the Levinson email. The Levinson email was then turned over to the NBA in July, and then ultimately the rumors were kind of swirling around towards the end of last week, and then Bruce Levinson stepped down, or at least said that he's going to sell the team as of yesterday.
Yeah, I wonder with those 2 points if maybe it suggests a systematic problem within the organization.
Well, I think that there's a couple things going on. First, the ownership within the Hawks, Bruce Levinson doesn't live in Atlanta. So the remarks that were made clearly were not fact-based. He doesn't live in Atlanta. He actually lives in Washington, D.C. So I think that I just don't think he understands the demographic here in Atlanta. And as a result, obviously this got picked up, and because of obviously the Donald Sterling issue, there's a heightened sensitivity within not only the NBA but all sports franchises. So I think that his stepping down is probably the right move.
But unlike the Donald Sterling situation, he has some defenders today. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar writing for Time magazine that Levinson, quote, isn't a racist but a businessman. If that's the case, why do you think he is being forced out here?
Well, there's actually some rumors going on. If you step back to 2011, the Spirit, which is the organization that actually owns the Hawks, tried to sell and was unsuccessful in that sale attempt. It actually was thwarted by the NBA. So there are some rumors that are swirling today that by having this come out, it gives Bruce Levinson the ability to sell the team. And given what the franchise value of the LA Clippers was, and also the Milwaukee Bucks that sold for $575 million, now's the time.
Maybe this is an exit strategy for him. In fact, I saw one article basically say that today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real possibility. The idea, though, of the demographics that he put in the email, again, were completely off the mark. And I think that, where he is a businessman, he realizes that, the Atlanta Hawks are one of only 4 teams that are losing money in the NBA. They're basically running below 50% in attendance. So he is correct that they need to get more bodies in there. But I would say that if you're going to want to put more bodies in, put better talent on the court. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. And they're from that standpoint, they only put about $58 million into the players, where you get, like, for example, a Los Angeles Lakers that has an $85 million budget. So other than Al Horford, that's the only real kind of superstar on the team.
Do you think that he's going to face further penalties from the league, or do you think by him coming forward and atoning a little bit here that he won't face the in essence, death penalty that Sterling faced?
Well, I again, because he lives in Washington, I think this may be a way for him to get out. And I think that Adam Silver wants to move this along quickly. Now it goes into the hands of the NBA. The NBA will then take the bids, because at that point they're the ones that control who buys the team. So I don't know that it's going to be like the Sterling issue. I think that the NBA will try to expedite an exit strategy for Bruce, but I don't think it's going to be like the Sterling deal.
All right, as good as Silver looks for the NBA, Roger Goodell for the NFL looks bad today. Ray Rice, of course, this video coming out of him beating his girlfriend to unconsciousness today. He originally was suspended for 2 days when this came out about a month ago for 2 games. Now he's been basically released by the Baltimore Ravens and suspended indefinitely by the league. The question is, what happens to the commissioner now? Do you believe they did not actually see this video, which is what they're claiming?
That's what they're claiming. I don't know the answer. If, in fact, it turns out that the league saw the video, then I certainly think that there are going to probably be voices out there that say that Goodell's got to go. But I'm basing the assumptions on what the league is saying, which is league is saying is that they didn't know. Goodell, back in August, after they put a policy, remember that when this incident happened and they gave Ray Rice the 2-game suspension, they didn't have a policy in place to deal with this type of incident. Afterwards, they then put in a 6-game first offense and then a ban from the league, or a potential ban from the league afterwards. But even Goodell had said in August that he realized he didn't do enough. Okay. With this video surfacing, certainly it's caused both the Ravens and the NFL to make obvious harsher action. I think it's the right move. And I think that ultimately Goodell's, whether or not he was involved or knew the video, I think that will be whether or not he has some insight in it.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. Hopefully we'll have you back on sometime soon not to talk about these off-the-court issues.
I hope not.
Appreciate
Thanks, Andrew.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. The European Union has passed a new round of sanctions against Russia. However, their enforcement is being delayed to assess whether a Ukraine ceasefire is actually holding. Meanwhile, Russia continues to deny that it is deploying soldiers or sending weapons across its shared border, and it has threatened to ban Western airlines from flying over its territory if it is slapped with more sanctions. A good reason for the British to pour themselves a glass of Glenlivet. The latest poll reveals that Scottish voters favor independence by a slight margin, the first time a poll has shown majority support. Amid the rising risk of a defection, the British pound took a sharp tumble against the U.S. dollar and the euro today. The vote is scheduled to take place on September 18th. China's Alibaba will soon be trading in the U.S. in what is to be the biggest IPO ever. The e-commerce giant is looking to raise as much as $24 billion. This would put the company's market value at about $160 billion total. That's on par with Amazon's current valuation and compares to eBay at $67 billion and Google at $404 billion. Meanwhile, Yahoo is in for a huge windfall, with the company owning over 20% of Alibaba. In what has to be worrisome news for the credit card industry, nearly 2/3 of millennials don't have a single credit card to their names. That's according to a new survey from Bankrate.com, which found that 63% of Americans between 18 and 29 years of age have no credit cards, and only 23% of them have one card. Reasons may include that the economy and mounting student debt, as well as recent reforms making it more difficult for younger Americans to get credit cards. And it's the latest promotion from Olive Garden to lure folks in the door. The restaurant chain, whose business has seriously softened in recent years, is offering its first ever never-ending pasta pass. Nice. For $100, it allows all you can eat pasta, salad, bread, and soda for 7 weeks. Olive Garden will only be selling 1,000 of the gut-busting passes starting today on its website. Ebola is costing lives and money. But not enough money is being spent on fighting a disease that UN health officials say is spiraling out of control. So where is the global outrage? Stephen Morrison is the director of global health policy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he joins us on the phone. Stephen, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
The United Nations says it needs $600 million to combat Ebola. The first question is, does it need that much money, and where will it spend the money?
Well, it's certainly, by all indications, given the gravity of this crisis, we can go into details. $600 million is a fairly accurate assessment of what is needed right now, today. I don't think it's a full assessment of what the price tag is going to be for this crisis, given how fast it is burgeoning and mushrooming. But it's going to go towards creating treatment centers, towards putting in place another 1,000 to 1,500 beds, creating laboratory facilities, and most importantly, bringing in the thousands of health workers who are required in order to break transmission and break this epidemic, and equipping them with the protective gear that they are going to require. Those are the fundamentals. There's an action plan that the World Health Organization put together that enumerates by country. The 3 key countries, of course, are Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. It's now also in Nigeria. There's a smaller outbreak in Congo, and there are cases that we've seen that have entered other countries. But the principal need is in those 3 core countries.
Stephen, do you think right now that the leading world nations here have risen to the occasion just yet? You know, when we look at, for example, the terrorism threats, for example, with ISIS and the outrage we're hearing, do you see that being matched in fighting this disease?
I think what you need to keep in mind here is that the response, the international response, is late, very late, in meeting this requirement. And there's no question that this is a security crisis threatening the stability and viability of this entire region of West Africa. It's come upon us very, very swiftly in the last 6 to 8 weeks, but it's been building now for 7 or 8 months. It has not been able to rival the security crisis that ISIS poses in Iraq and Syria, nor the Ukraine-Russia confrontation, nor the war that recently ceased between Israel and Palestinians. It's been a very crowded geopolitical environment. It's just now beginning to break through. President Obama spoke yesterday in his interview with Chuck Todd about the fact that the U.S. military is now committed to assisting in providing lift and field hospitals and perhaps some mobile testing facilities into the equation here, which would be very desperately needed.
Okay. Stephen Morrison, Vice President and Director at Global Health Policy Center and Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, a bus driver who hasn't made it out of the 3rd grade is our favorite person of the day.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Songhai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
In our regulatory police state segment today, you know what we need protection from? People who wear Elmo costumes and the like. As any tourist who has strolled through Times Square in New York City knows, there are people who dress up as superheroes and other characters. There are a few. Now, there have been a few unpleasant incidents, including one where Spider-Man punched a cop. So, the New York City Council is now voting to make them all register and get licenses. Think about it. The government forcing people who dress as SpongeBob SquarePants to get licensed. Maybe they need to see a shrink. I don't know about SpongeBob. And that takes us to our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reasons. Today, it is a 9-year-old boy who took a city bus for a joyride while wearing his pajamas. Apparently, the bus in Saskatoon, Canada, was left on the side of the road with its engine on and no one inside. The boy, dressed only in his jammies, apparently walked on board, put the bus in drive, and then drove it for 3 city blocks. Police say he had to drive it standing up because he wasn't tall enough to both sit down and reach the gas pedal. The bus only came to a stop when the pint-sized Canuck bus thief ran into another bus. No one was injured, and the boy won't be charged because he's only 9 years old. And whose fault is it really that a pajama-wearing 3rd grader stole a city bus? And so, this unnamed 9-year-old is our favorite person of the day. Next, why Africa continues to outperform. Our conversation with the managing director of Access Bank is next here on Arise Exchange.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
As we've been reporting, despite Europe's continuing economic decline, Africa continues to grow. Earlier, we spoke with one of the leaders of Africa's financial system. Herbert Wigley is the managing director of Access Bank in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Sort of timely to have you here right now because, they recently downgraded Europe's economy. And with the possibility of Europe slipping back into a recession, we're seeing a much different atmosphere in Africa and really in Nigeria right now. What do you attribute that to? And do you think that growth is going to continue?
Well, first of all, I think Africa represents the next growth opportunity. And within the continent, you have a couple of countries that have significant growth potential, and Nigeria happens to be one of them. Nigeria has an overwhelming growth, population growth opportunity. We have 170 million people, and I think the net population growth on an annual basis is about 3.5%. Significant resources. People say oil is what is critical in Nigeria. The truth is that oil constitutes perhaps less than 14% of our GDP. Several things can happen if the reforms in the power industry goes on. You will see double-digit growth in Nigeria, and this is very significant. It's the largest economy in Africa.
That's right, and we've seen growth in everything from entertainment and telecom and the financial sectors industry as well. Are you pleased with the pace of reform in the financial industry and the transparency in the industry, or do you want to see it quicker? Absolutely.
I think if you look across the continent, I think perhaps apart from South Africa, Nigeria has the most robust financial services sector. In a lot of places, you would see that the financial services sector grows as the economy develops. But I think in the case of Nigeria, the growth of the financial services sector has had significant impact on the economy. Now, it's gotten better because the transparency levels are a lot higher than ever before. The industry has been largely de-risked, and the banks are of significant size and magnitude to be able to determine how things play out in the different critical sectors like power, like agriculture and manufacturing.
All of which are very key
Absolutely.
to Nigeria's future. Let's talk about the banking sector for a moment. A very strong industry from what I understand. What are the key elements that you see that are sort of standing out right now in the sector?
I think, first of all, you see a higher level of compliance. The industry has basically taken world-class standards as far as compliance is concerned. All the things around KYC and all of that. There's a more recent migration for things that have to do with biometrics, and the whole idea is to minimize issues around fraud and all of that and lift up the overall levels of compliance. But in terms of the ratios and Basel II, the banks have been asked, even though we've been running a parallel arrangement
to Basel II,
to Basel II, but they've been asked to run the traditional Basel I and then Basel II as well. Compliance, and there will be a complete cutover, I think, around about October.
And just for a step back, Basel II is about the financial structures and securities within the banking system. You're involved with MasterCard in a new program there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. What we did was we actually partnered with the National Identity Card Authority in Nigeria, where we're basically issuing cards for all Nigerians, which is basically an ID card. And the card does a couple of things. First of all, it shows your identity, but secondly, it has the capacity to make payments. All right, so we're basically moving ahead of what is happening in most parts of the world, even in the developed markets. All right, to a system where your ID card can actually be used for payments. So that's what's happening, and all of these things have far-reaching implications as far as the economy is concerned. Tax payments,
security, I imagine, is a major concern. Cybersecurity in a country and in a continent that's still sort of at the beginning levels of many of this.
Yes, so it's extremely critical. If you see the amount of frauds that are going on these days on cybersecurity, a critical thing would be for you to have a very strong identity card management system, and that's what it's supposed to be geared towards solving as well.
Okay. Thank you. Terrific.
Thank you, Andrew.
I appreciate your time.
Yes.
Herbert Wigley. Tomorrow on Arise Xchange, Apple expected to unveil the iPhone 6 and reportedly the newest wearable technology, the iWatch, will bring you the very latest on its newest creations and the cost behind some of the market's most anticipated gadgets. Let's take a look at the markets once again. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing down along with the S&P 500, though recovering some of those losses late in the day. The Nasdaq did finish the day up. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. We'll see you here tomorrow on Arise. Stay with us.